Welcome. In this session, we are going to learn about the high availability configuration in Cloud SQL for PostgreSQL instance. As usual, everything is being mentioned in this document, so you can see that it is about the high availability of Cloud SQL for PostgreSQL. So the basic thing is why do we need the high availability? The high availability is required for an instance in because if that is particular instance goes down and if there is no alternative for that PostgreSQL instance, in that case it is going to be called as the complete disaster. So availability of the high configuration, it causes the minimization of the downtime which has occurred during the outage of that PostgreSQL, or it may be possible that the zone where your PostgreSQL instance is running, if that particular entire zone is down, that means if there is an alternate region wherein you have created your PostgreSQL instance, which is for high availability, then uh, doing the failover, which will be actually automated and will be taken care by the Cloud SQL, it will fail over the instance to the other zone where it is available. So that's the reason why we need high availability. So high availability of the instance will be there in one particular region with multiple zones. So zones are physically apart, distant apart, several miles, so that the disaster or some kind of calamities on one particular location could be avoided to reach to the other. There may be other alternatives as well, but for this session, this is all about the high availability, wherein the multiple zones of that particular region, they will be configured for high availability. So when the failover happens, the data will be served from the alternate location, which is the high available location in alternate zone. So what are the terminologies which are used in case of high availability? So you have something called as primary instance, which is used for serving the data to the application. And if the high availability configuration is configured, in that case, there will be an standby instance, which will be having the persistent disk through the synchronization process, which is on the disk basis. The sync happens between the disk on the primary and the instant and the standby instance, and they will be in sync with each other. So this is known as the synchronous replication. So synchronous replication is on disk to disk basis that happens between two zones in a region, and once there is a commit which is fired by the client or the end user, it comes to the PostgreSQL primary instance, and simultaneously it goes to the standby instance that is having the persistent disk. So that's a background how the primary instance will be there, what a standby instance will be there, and you cannot access the standby instance because that will be continuously replicated from the primary using the synchronous replication. And in case the entire zone, so let me show you the option when you create your PostgreSQL instance. At that time, you mention choose region and zonal activity. So if you select a particular zone or region, that is, let's say in US, I select some particular region. So inside that region, there will be multiple zones which are physically distant apart data centers, and they are being named as, let's say, if I select the primary zone as so in this particular region there are one, two, three, four zones are available. So if I select one of them as primary zone, then other than that primary zone, I cannot select the primary zone as the secondary. So other than the primary zone, you can select any of the available zone, and that will be used for the replication purpose. So the data will be synchronously copied from primary to the standby instance, which you cannot use it. So when are we going to use it? When there is a failover happens. Let's say the entire zone, let's say this is my primary zone, US Central 1A, and my standby zone is this one, US Central 1B. If primary zone completely goes down, then a failover happens, and in the failover, what happens? The primary goes down and the standby instance becomes primary. In that case, the application will connect to the primary instance, or and what happens back behind the scene? There will be persistent disk which is used to copy the data from primary to standby instance using the synchronous replication. Synchronous replication. So there are two kind of replication. One is synchronous, another is asynchronous. In is synchronous, when a commit happens from the application end, the data will be simultaneously going to both the instances, primary instance and the standby instance. If there is any problem, it is not going to write anywhere. So in this way, using the disk-based replication, the data gets copied to the primary and the standby uh, instance. In case there is a failover happens, then the primary goes down. If primary is a problem, then it is failed over to the standby instance, and now your standby instance becomes primary, but the vice versa is not possible. So once the standby becomes primary and primary goes down, and after some hours, if primary comes back, then it will not be treated as the standby or the primary, whatsoever it was. Then you have to recreate that standby once again. You have to create the standby again. Then that will be part of the high availability. And if you have to fail back again, then you can do the failback so that you can come back to your original node. There is a slight difference if you talk about the read replicas. Read replicas, they cannot be made highly available like the primary instances. So when there is a zonal outage, traffic to the read replicas in that zone, it stops. It is not going to work. Once the zone becomes available again, then the read replica in the zone will resume replication from the primary instance. And if the read replicas in the zone that is not in an outage, then they are connected to the standby instance and it becomes the primary instance. So that's how your read replicas are going to work. So they are not highly available. So the common configuration, maybe there are three zones. Let's say there is zone A, zone B, and zone C. So you can configure high availability for zone A and B, and you can create a read replica in zone C that can you use for the read-only application. So about the failover overview, so Cloud SQL will automatically switch to the standby instance in case there is some problem with the primary instance or the zone is having any issues. And the operation is such a fast operation that you will not be able to detect it, and there may be a fluctuation in your application and if the way they are configured. And for the basic requirement for the failover is your the primary will keep on pinging the standby instance which are there in the high availability, and if there in case there is a heartbeat problem, then primary declares the standby unresponsive, and in case there is a disaster with the primary, then that is not going to happen. So for the failover to happen successfully, it is mandatory that your standby should be healthy and the zone must be available. And that's all basic about the high availability in PostgreSQL in case of cloud SQL for PostgreSQL. And if you want it in one session, we will see how to configure it and how to perform the failover. So we can expect it hopefully in the next session. I hope this is going to help, and thank you.